What is good, Josh? I'm the Smooth Game Man, back with yet another reaction video, baby. And today we're back with another Anime Tuesday. As today we got all Fire Force captains ranked and explained. Fire Force is an anime that your boy has not yet seen, but I also don't care about spoilers, so I'm gonna go ahead and check this out for you guys, man. But it's on my list of shows to watch because it does look pretty fire. And I'm not gonna lie, I've been told by a lot of people recently that I look similar to one of the characters in the show. It's got me piqued my interest to, want to go check it out at least a little bit, because I want to go to some anime conventions. I want to go to like some different areas where anime is just out there. People are dressed up like anime characters, and I might even do a little dressing up myself. So I've done a little research into what I could do, and one of the people was from this show. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna add this to my watch list. I'm gonna see if this show is gas, pass, or trash. But let me know down below, have you guys seen Fire Force? I'm sure if you clicked on this video, you have. And what are your thoughts on it? How good of an anime is it? Would you recommend it to me? All that type of stuff down below. But I'm still gonna check it out regardless. But without further ado though, let's go and get the NCM of this video, man. Link down below to the original video if you guys want to see the full thing. But of course, we don't have to worry about copyright here, so we're gonna watch the whole thing unedited. Let's get it.
So, Fire Force Season 3 is upon us. The 5-year hiatus has come to an end and peak content is back. And with the return of said peak content comes one of the more important battles in the manga finally being animated. That is the battle between Shinra and the captain of Fire Force 1, Leonard Burns. Also that Shinra and the rest of Company 8 can save their captain, Akitaru Obi. But in this season, where captains are either becoming bad guys or prisoners, I see that a lot of people are asking the question, how do certain captains from particular fire forces stack up against each other? And there has never been a more relevant time to ask that question, as we are all now staring down the barrel of the final season of Fire Force. A season that will display to all of us the peak power of all of the remaining captains. See, the captains in Fire Force are undoubtedly some of the strongest characters in the universe. High-level second or third generation pyrokinetics, or just incredibly talented or strong unpowered ex-firefighters who have found ways to kill infernals. Every single one of the captains is able to do something at an incredibly high level. So if they were all to duke it out, who would come out on top? Well, today, that's the question we're going to be trying to answer, because today we're talking all of the captains from Fire Force ranked and explained. But before we get to ranking or explaining anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Before we go any further, and if you guys are looking for one additional Nick video a week, you can find my Naruto reaction series in the fourth wall link in the description below. So, the captains of all 8 fire companies are as different as the fire companies themselves. Some captains focus on medical practices, some focus on research, and some are just straight up military leaders. And therefore, if you're trying to rank the captains in terms of power, like we are today, there's a pretty big disparity amongst them, as even amongst some of the captains who specialize in fighting against infernals, there's unpowered captains, second generation pyrokinetics, and third generation pyrokinetics. There's even second, third generation pyrokinetic chimeras like Benimaru. And thus, while a lot of the captains that are placed towards the end of this list don't have that much in terms of literal firepower, that doesn't mean that they're not useful within the confines of their own specific roles. And I really think that's important to point out with our 8th place spot, our last placed captain, the captain of Fire Company 6, Captain Huang. See, Fire Company 6 is an incredibly important fire company. However, them really even being called the fire company in the first place is kind of a misnomer. See, because, well, yes, they do have the same structure as all of the other fire companies. Fire Company 6 doesn't go out and fight against infernals. They don't douse fires, they don't put monsters to rest. Rather, Fire Company 6 actually simply operates as a hospital for all the other fire companies. And while nurses, medics, EMTs are an essential part of any military operation, they in their own right really aren't a fire company. And thus, Captain Huang is kind of the representation of Company 6 not being a combat-oriented fire company, as she herself really has nothing as it pertains to offensive firepower. Now, that doesn't mean that she doesn't have fire powers, as she is a third generation pyrokinetic, but her third generation pyrokinetic abilities don't manifest offensively. See, Captain Huang's ignition ability manifests as an Asclepion. And for those of you who don't know what an Asclepion is, it's the symbol that's often used to display a hospital. See, this symbol is a singular serpent wrapped around a rod, and it comes from the story of the Rod of Asclepius, which is a nod to the Greek god Asclepius, the god of healing and medicine. Now, when Captain Huang used—
See, didn't I say y'all can learn something every single day? I ain't know none of that. I'm not gonna lie to you, I did not know none of that. They didn't teach me that in school.
this ability, her arm becomes the rod, and her third generation pyrokinetic ability wraps a fiery serpent around said arm. She can then use this fiery serpent by leading it into somebody's body to amplify the speed at which people regenerate from wounds or diseases by accelerating the cell division of the patient's body. Kind of like how Sakura and Tsunade are able to heal themselves using their mitotic regeneration. By allowing for the cells of the patient's body to rapidly undergo mitosis, they're able to close wounds or create white blood cells to battle against diseases. And if Captain Huang is healing a third generation pyrokinetic, that is somebody like her and somebody with insanely high fire resistance, she's able to use her powers to the max of her abilities, being able to push people's bodies to be able to regenerate almost immediately and being able to eliminate their pain instantaneously. The best example that we've seen of Captain Huang's healing abilities is when she saved Shinra from his battle against Sho. The battle which ended with Haomeya controlling Sho's body to stab Shinra through his chest with Sho's katana, a wound that would have proved fatal if Shinra wasn't immediately rushed to Company 6 and the care of Captain Huang. However, even though she is incredibly important to all of the other fire companies, in terms of fighting ability, she has none, so she has to be at the bottom of this list. Now, after Captain Huang at the number 7 spot, we have Captain Hagu, captain of Fire Company 4. Now,
every senator and political leader in the world right there.
Now, Suichiro Hagu is the first captain we're talking about on this list who doesn't have a pyrokinetic ability. And he, much like Captain Obi, the captain of Fire Company 8, was an unpowered firefighter who started his career fighting against regular fires until eventually he rose so rapidly through the ranks of the regular fire defense agency that he was elected to join Special Fire Company number 4. Now, Captain Hagu is by far and away the oldest captain we're going to be talking about on this list, and therefore undoubtedly the most experienced. Well, in the early part of his tenure as the captain of Special Fire Company number 4, he taught Lieutenant Ponko Pot that the most important life that he could ever save is his own, because he is a firefighter, and so long as he is alive, he can live on to save more people. After the great disaster in the year 196, when Captain Hagu forced him...
That's a unique way to think. The most important life you can save is your own, because as long as you're alive, you can save more people. So that means you let somebody else die to save yourself, because you can save more people than they can save. What they say, the greater is better than the one, or is the one better than the greater? Which, I don't know. Is he speaking with that one? I think he might be spitting.
Experienced an Adola link that left him with a stigmata of 3 scars across his face, his demeanor and outlook on life massively changed, as rather than trying to preserve his life, he became a complete and total masochist, allowing his opponents to rip him to shreds so they could feel their flames. However, this doesn't mean that Captain Hagu was not an incredibly capable fighter, because he was. Though unpowered, Captain Hagu, much like Captain Obi, was an incredibly proficient fighter with just firefighting tools. However, instead of axes and extinguishers and gigantic shields, Captain Hagu used safety wires to constrict the movements of his opponents. And while we can't necessarily say exactly how powerful Captain Hagu is without Pon's buffs, as the lieutenant of Company 4, Pon Kopat has a 3rd generation pyrokinetic ability that allows for him to place flame-resistant buffs on people, of which he's always using on Captain Hagu. But what we can say is that Captain Hagu was able to battle on relatively even terms with a bloodlusted Shinra being controlled by the first pillar, Amaterasu, while this iteration of Shinra had every intention of killing him. And while you can 100% make the argument that Captain Hagu would have died many times over without Pon's buffs, Captain Hagu still had the speed, ability, and durability to keep up with Shinra in this fight. And while Captain Hagu was killed by a destroyer in Gold, a character who the 4 girls of Company 8 are about to take on simultaneously, we did see that Captain Hagu showed the ability to withstand some of the attacks from Gold until his body did eventually give out. However, on account of the fact that pretty much every other captain on this list would probably be able to take on a destroyer by themselves, and Captain Hagu is an unpowered who relies pretty heavily on the buffs of his lieutenant, I can't really justifiably place him much higher than our number 7 spot. But trust me, I did have a real conversation with myself as to whether or not Captain Hagu was stronger than our number 6 spot, because coming up at number 6, we have Captain Hibana. Captain Hibana, also known as Princess Hibana, also known as the captain of Fire Company 5, is one of, if not the first real bad guy in all of Fire Force. Now, Hibana unfortunately suffers from the fact that she's introduced very early on in Fire Force's story. And worse than that, she's introduced very early on in Fire Force's story as an antagonist. And thus, when she does eventually end up coming face to face with Shinra, and Shinra finds himself victorious in said battle, it's really kind of sad for her, because she's a captain of a special fire company, and he just joined the Fire Force. And honestly, Shinra coming out victorious in I think episode 4 or 5 in this battle against Hibana is even more perplexing when you think about what her pyrokinetic ability is. See, because Because while yes, Hibana is more of a researcher than she is a fighter, coming from a background of growing up in a convent and being incredibly curious about the secrets of human combustion, and therefore partaking in a myriad of unethical experiments to try and crack the code of human combustion, and going as far as aligning her entire company with Hajime Industries, who are well known as basically the bad guys of the Fire Force universe. With all of that in consideration, and the fact that Hibana herself never really shows up on the battlefield, her third generation pyrokinetic ability is still insane. See, Hibana wields a Japanese war fan. See, a war fan in Japan is a hand fan that was used by samurais up until the late 1800s. A fan that was either used to cool somebody off or as a weapon. But some of you may be wondering, how could you ever use a fan as a weapon? And that's a great question, because all the images of fan...
Go watch the Kyoshi Warriors. Go watch my boy Avatar. Go watch my boy Sokka try to take on the fan real quick.
That you probably have in your mind are fans made out of things like paper and wood. However, war fans were often made almost entirely out of metal, with metal spokes creating the frame of the fan and lacquered paper covered with a thin sheet of iron to make the actual fan part. Now, through this war fan, Hibana channels her third generation pyrokinetic ability that she calls Clematis, that allows her to surround an opponent in a flurry of what appear to be cherry blossoms. However, these cherry blossoms are actually an ignition ability, and when they come into contact with even third generation pyrokinetic skin, they can singe that skin and inflict harmful cuts. On top of that, when these sakura blossoms are directed in a line, as opposed to just falling over a battlefield, they've been shown to be able to punch through the cores of infernals with ease. However, that's not usually the way that Hibana uses her third generation pyrokinetic ability. See, because Hibana's play is controlling the temperature of a battlefield. See, by covering an entire battlefield in her pyrokinetic ability, Hibana's actually able to snuff out other pyrokinetic ignition abilities that rely on external factors, like Mirage, the member of the Whiteclad's Mirages. See, because Mirage's ability relies on warm air hitting cold air, as Hibana is simply able to heat up all of the air on the battlefield, making sure that there's no hot air meeting cold air, completely erasing Mirage's ability to use their pyrokinetic ability in their battle against Arthur. On top of that, as she can control the heat of an entire battlefield, she's able to envelop people's entire bodies in heat, giving them heat syncope, or basically, as we call it in America, heat stroke. And as she has complete and total control over all of the temperature around her, she's able to do this to multiple people simultaneously, completely immobilizing anybody on the battlefield she wants to. However, even though Hibana has an insane amount of intelligence and offensive ability, she has basically no training in combat, as she prides herself on being a researcher and not a barbarian. And therefore, comparatively to all the other captains, her endurance is seriously lacking. And more than that, she is by far and away the frailest out of any of the captains, being able to be knocked out with a singular punch, or simply just something falling on her head. And thus, for me, out of all of the captains with offensive pyrokinetic abilities, she's the weakest. And
I guess I see why he's saying that now then, because like in a one-on-one fight, the other dude was stronger. So if all it takes is landing one punch, now can he land that punch? He does have some fire resistance, so he might be able to, you know, outlast her. He's been in battle longer, so he's got probably more battle IQ, and she doesn't even really like to fight. You could make that switch, you know, put him above her, low key.
Hence the 6th spot. I mean, she lost like in episode 5 Shinra, but she did technically only lose to Shinra once, which is more than we can say for our number 5 entry on this list, because coming up at number 5, we have Captain Giovanni. See, Captain Giovanni is kind of like the Orochimaru of the Fire Force universe. He's creepy, he's always changing bodies, and he never seems to go away, even though he's always being beaten. And that's because, unfortunately, like Giovanni's a genius in both pyrokinetic ability and scientific endeavor. See, Giovanni is a second-generation pyrokinetic, which allows for him to control all of the fire-powered mechanisms that exist under his cloak. Whether that's launching his mechanical hands as projectiles that can chase after targets, or heating the wires of said mechanical hands to the point where they're able to cut through people and or trees, everything under Dr. Giovanni's cloak is controlled by his secondary pyrokinetic ability. But the thing is, everything under Dr. Giovanni's cloak is always changing. And that's because he's a genius scientist with no real moral code that's made everything from mechanical arms and blades that were strong enough to challenge Obi to feats of strength, tasers capable of knocking out even the most powerful of opponents, or even hidden guns in places like his cane. However, it was in the joint investigation arc that we realized just how far Giovanni was willing to go in terms of experimenting on himself, as it was revealed as Shinra battled against Dr. Giovanni in the Nether that he had modified his own body to take on the physiology of countless firebugs. And with his body now being basically just an army of bugs, he took on many bug-like abilities, like the fact that he was able to react react to and dodge bullets fired from Lieutenant Hinawa because his eyes are now compounded like that of a fly, allowing for him to see in all directions and immediately react to any and all stimuli. On top of this, he was also able to read the pheromones of his opponents, which allowed for him to guess what they were about to do, split his body into swarms of bugs whenever he took physical damage, or project sharp insectoid limbs out of his body to try and slash at his opponents. And even when he was decapitated by Arthur in the battle in the Nether, he was able to survive as just a head, dispersing his body as a swarm of bugs to cover his escape. And as his body now exists as a swarm of infernal bugs, he can also access a perpetual, though artificial, Adola link that allows for him to send communications to others through the Adola. And while this hasn't yet been displayed in the anime, he also has a consciousness transference ability that allows for him to send one of the bugs that is in his body to bite somebody else to transfer his consciousness over to said person, allowing him, much like Orochimaru, to prolong his life by constantly switching bodies in emergency situations. Now, to me, it feels relatively obvious that Dr. or Captain Giovanni should be higher than Hibana. While the result of the first battle between Dr. Giovanni and Shinra was kind of a tie, and the result of the second battle was a loss and a retreat for Dr. Giovanni, even though people like Hinawa and Arthur stepped in both of those iterations, the Shinra that was battling against Dr. Giovanni was stronger than the iteration of Shinra that was battling against Hibana, which is why, to me, Giovanni's got to be at our number 5 spot, especially because we've seen Giovanni fight against our number 4 spot, and while our number 4 spot wasn't exactly the main character in that fight against Captain Giovanni, they were not only able to land important and decisive blows against Giovanni, which didn't affect him all that much, admittedly, but also never necessarily seemed like they were outpaced in this battle. And that's because at our number 4 spot, we have Captain of Fire Company number 8, Akitaru Obi. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that Giovanni was the captain of Fire Company 3, but he got kicked out once it was revealed that he was a White Cloud. Now, Obi, like Captain Hagu, started his career in the Fire Defense Agency, which is the name in the Fire Force universe for people who don't kill Infernals. And in the Fire Defense Agency, Obi was one of the greatest firefighters they had. He was such a great firefighter that he was decorated twice. However, both of those decorations were revoked from him because he would constantly shirk orders from his superiors to save the lives of citizens. But because of this, Obi was deemed as the perfect possible person to start Fire Company 8, a company specifically designed to look into what all of the other fire companies are doing and see if their operations are legit. However, this is obviously a very dangerous situation for Captain Obi on account of the fact that he is unpowered, which is why Obi trains every single day. And Obi lifting every single day allows for him to carry the 30 kilograms of gear he needs into combat every single time he goes. Whether that be gigantic iron shields that can stop flames from infernals, a myriad of extinguishers or extinguisher bombs, fire axes with guns in them, and so on and so forth, making Obi essentially the Batman of the Fire Force universe. Which is why Obi time and time again has shown the ability to be in battles that he probably shouldn't have been. Like when Obi in his battle against Captain Giovanni ripped train tracks out of the ground to throw at Captain Giovanni, which actually spurned Captain Giovanni to say that his strength is insane. And he's not kidding, as we've seen Obi use things like the core annihilating pile bunker to destroy cores in giant infernals. But even with all—
Ain't no way my boy just threw a Captain America shield across the map like that, and it actually sliced through and blew it up. But my man is out there really battling like Captain America.
This gear, Obi is still not as fireproof as everybody else in the Fire Force, but his insane pain tolerance and commitment to putting Infernals to rest allows for him to do things like grappling Infernals or people using pyrokinetic abilities, even if it does burn away his skin, which is best put on display when Obi finds himself in combat against Benimaru Shinmon, the strongest firefighter in all of the special fire companies. And over the course of this fight, Obi takes blow after blow after blow from Benimaru, all so they can get close enough to land his own punch on Benimaru, which led Benimaru to claim that Obi is the literal personification of hysterical strength, which is backed up by the fact that in one of the more recent episodes from season 3 of Fire Force, Obi was able to rip through chains simply by flexing and make his body so hard that infernal insects couldn't bite through it. But unfortunately, being unpowered can only get you so far, which is why Obi is gonna have to come in under our number 3 spot, Gustav Honda, aka the captain of Fire Company 2. See, every single fire company outside of Company 8 has an allegiance aligned with some other outside force. Company 1 has an allegiance with the Holy Soul Temple. Company 3 is aligned with Hajime Industries. Company 4 controls the Fire Force Academy. Company 5 was previously aligned with Hajime Industries, but is no longer because Hibana has swung more to the side of Fire Company 8. Fire Company 6 controls the hospital, and Fire Company 7 is aligned with the Proto-Nationalists. Now, Fire Company 8 is actually aligned with the Fire Defense Agency in the same way that Fire Company 4 is aligned with the Fire Defense defense agency, but as their job is to investigate all the other fire companies, they're kind of independent. But Fire Company 2 is unique in the fact that it reports directly to the Tokyo Army, making Fire Company 2 the most militant out of any of the fire companies, and presumably based off how many soldiers they were able to send into the Nether, also the largest company. And now, while we don't know a ton about Gustav Honda, we do know that he's a third-generation pyrokinetic whose ability manifests as him lighting his own scalp on fire, and thus his premier move seems to be rocketing himself into opponents head first. And we've seen him use that ability at pretty insanely high levels, like in the Joint Operation arc, where he saves Tamaki and Juggernaut from their impending doom at the hands of 2 more Whiteclads, or in the Verse Special Fire Force Company 1 arc, where Gustav Honda literally one-shots a...
That boy hit bald as... My boy got a globe on top of his head. Oh, let me read your fortune. Head. Boy, what is with that head? Boy, oh, light bulb head. Boy, let me think about it real quick. Head.
Giant Infernal, something that, mind you, took the combined force of all of Company 8 at the beginning of Season 2. And really, that's the only real feat we actually have for Gustav Honda, but showing off firepower that allows for you to wipe out a Giant Infernal all by yourself is something that we only see from like 5 max people in the Fire Force universe. Tie that into the fact that he is the captain of the most militant fire company, and it would make sense that he would be one of the stronger captains out there. But enough about captains we know nothing about. Let's talk about a captain that I just posted a video telling you that you know nothing about them, because coming up at number 2, we have Leonard Burns, also known as freshly converted Whiteclad and former-ish captain of Fire Company 1, the lion who shall burn away all the devils, Leonard Burns. Leonard Burns is only one of 2 people in the entire universe that Benimaru Shinmon has ever been curious enough about to fight. And while Benimaru and Burns never get to duke it out, Benimaru did think that Burns would be a good match. Now, Leonard Burns is a 3rd-generation pyrokinetic whose ignition ability is known as Voltage Nova. And while in the 2 battles that Leonard Burns had against Shinra leading up to their 3rd battle they're currently having in the anime right now, we saw him use his Voltage Nova. We didn't know that he was using Voltage Nova, as he was only using Stage 1. And that's because in the lead up to this 3rd and final battle between Burns and Shinra, Burns didn't need to take Shinra or Arthur seriously. He is by far and away, out of all 8 captains, the most physically dominating. Yeah, Obi probably included, being able to in either his base form or Stage 1 to sweep away Shinra's rapids and block Arthur's plasma sword with nothing more than his hands and forearms. However, when you take into account his 3rd-generation pyrokinetic ability, Voltage Nova, that allows for him to treat his own body like a furnace, lighting a flame in his fire and stoking it until it gets hotter and hotter, passing him through stages 1 through 5. As it continues from stage 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, it continually unlocks new and hotter forms that put out so much heat that as he continues growing in power, he becomes less and less possible to hit, as the sheer force and heat radiating from his body means that even if you are able to eventually land a blow against him, it's been slowed so exponentially that it won't do any damage to him. However, unless you have the fire resistance ability of a high-grade 3rd-generation pyrokinetic, landing that blow may cost you whatever you use to throw it, on account of the fact that by the time that Leonard Burns hits stage 2 and or stage 3, the heat put off from his body is hot enough to melt concrete, which is why Leonard Burns has shown the ability to battle against Joker, an opponent who was able to go toe-to-toe with the likes of Sho, and Shinra using his hysterical strength, Korna, and Adola Link simultaneously. And on top of that, while we have seen Leonard Burns get to stage 5, we actually don't even know if stage 5 is as high as the stages go. But even with all of that in consideration, unfortunately, Leonard Burns is still not as strong as the man who has been hailed as the destroyer of Asakusa, the god of Asakusa, the strongest firefighter in the entirety of the Fire Force, our number 1 spot, Benimaru Shinmon. He kicked down the door of the Holy Soul Temple alongside Joker, fought all of their pyrokinetic altar boys, maybe, and then waltz into the Nether and beat the entirety of the Shadows force that the Holy Soul Temple keeps as basically their Anbu. All, well, mind you, not trying to kill them. And maybe the most impressive thing that Benimaru ever did, and this is a manga spoiler, so if you haven't read the manga, I would recommend stop listening for, well, I guess maybe the rest of the video, was when Benimaru found himself in combat up against his doppelganger from the Adola, and his doppelganger placed a Nichirin, the flame circle that Benimaru always has behind him, around the entire globe. But before his doppelganger doppelganger was able to destroy the entire globe, Benimaru destroyed said doppelganger with just one touch, implying that Benimaru is one of the 3 or maybe 4 people in the entire Fire Force universe who is a planetary level threat. Not to mention Benimaru in the Obi rescue arc battled against Haumea, Inca, and Charon all simultaneously, nullified the abilities of Haumea and Inca, and then shrugged off several attacks from Charon, one of the most physically powerful characters in all of Fire Force. So yeah, while Leonard Burns is an impressive character in Fire Force, he's no Benimaru Shinmon. But then again, no one's a Benimaru Shinmon, so we can't hold that against the other captains. And with that, that's all 8 Fire Force captains ranked and explained. But I'm curious.
And I gotta say, honestly, like I know I haven't seen the show, so I can't sit here and be like, oh, I think this, or what about this or that. Like, I haven't seen the show, so based off of everything that he said, I'm not gonna lie. The only thing I could see is moving 6 and 7. Swapping those 2 around, but everything else kind of lined up and made sense. It's got me more excited to see the show. That's why I don't mind watching these, because it makes me more excited, more hyped to see the show, because I really want to see Benimaru really like that. If he's as he describes, 1 and 2 are as he describes, I better not see them even come close to sweating in a fight. But 1 being that much stronger than 2, and 2 looked pretty dominant, I gotta say that I'm really excited to go ahead and see the show. I'm excited to see what's happening. Why are we fighting? Who gets took down? What is the white clad? I need to know all of that. So I mean, like I said, I don't care about spoilers. So y'all can drop them down below. If y'all want to tell me what the show's about, more about it, it's on my list of shows to get to. Here, I think I'm coming up on it soon. I'm actually finishing up right now Windbreaker. I'm actually all the way caught up. I think I still got to watch like the last week's episode, and then I'll be fully caught up, and I'll be moving on to another anime. I forgot which anime is next though. Coming up close though. I'm over here catching up on a lot of different stuff. So let me know what you guys think of this video down below, man. Do you guys agree with his listing? Is he telling the truth? Is he lying to me? Y'all let me know down below. I'm gonna trust y'all too. So I'll catch y'all in the next video. It's me, your boy Sean Smooth. I get black, black avatar King Leo. And I'll catch you guys in the next video, man. I wonder if I can be in Fire Force. Sounds like I want to be a 3rd generation if I am. So I kind of want that furnace ability. And mine to be black flames like Amaterasu. Yeah. That's gonna be my abilities. Peace.